I think we'll start now the feedback. Can you all hear? Very good. Just to recapitulate, the Assembly members who are sitting here have spent the last 45 minutes discussing the submissions received by the Assembly, and they've been given a random sample of 300 submissions to aid that discussion. And I mentioned earlier that they got them in hard copy, and I mentioned that it was a rather heavy tome. That's it. Also, I just want to mention that there were some, to start, for people who weren't here, there were some conversation starters. And they're there on the screen, and they're just, if you like, prompts to get the conversation going. But I just thought people who aren't here who weren't here at the back of the room or who are watching online would be interested in that. That was the way we got the conversation started. Now, what I'm going to do is to call on the facilitators at each table to summarise the key topics which have emerged at each table. If necessary, I might ask the facilitators to elaborate on any of the points raised, and if necessary, the members themselves can join in the discussion. So I'm going to kick things off by starting this time with table 14 at the back of the room.
Thank you, Judge. It was the general view at this table that in terms of the submissions, they encountered a lot of what they described as largely unprovable information that was presented as fact, that was very difficult to substantiate in any way, and they had a concern that that would be an issue going forward in terms of not being overly helpful to the process.
Yes.
There was also a feeling that on both sides, there's a rather polarized view on both sides that didn't reflect the nuance of the very complicated situation that the 8th presents. And that a lot of arguments on both sides were more emotive than factual or helpful. Does that summarize it? And that summarises the view at this table.
Thank you very much. And then table 13.
I'm the facilitator for table 13. The views of the citizens from this table, in terms of general comments, they welcomed getting the random sample to see the collated and printed responses. A number of the citizens commented that they hadn't had enough time to read it. One member indicated that she had read 500 submissions from the web, and some were balanced. That many of the submissions were from vested interests. In relation to the contents of the submissions, it was noted by the citizens that there was nothing surprising in them, that there were strong views from both sides being expressed rather than balanced arguments, and that the presentation of the arguments were black and white rather than the grey, nuanced. That there was a lot of repetition in the submissions with the changing of the words, and the citizens requested if it would be possible to get a percentage of the repetition submissions.
Yeah.
There was a lot of religious ethos in the submissions, for example, thou shalt not kill, and the citizens requested if you were to take the religious submissions out of the submissions, what would be left? One citizen commented that he wasn't clear how submissions were made. For example, he was a member of a trade union, and the trade union had made a submission, and he was a member and he hadn't been involved in that submission. There was zero respect for individual cases made in the submissions. For example, male in the equation, and how do you legislate for the individuals. In relation to arguments, the members noted page 53 of the submission. I won't name the person who made the submission. And should a group of cells have the same right as a woman? There was another paper referenced regarding describing from conception to implantation. That was noted. The members at the table also noted that a lot of reference was made to the 1 or 2% of cases such as fetal fatal abnormalities, rape, incest and teenage pregnancies, which amount for 1 to 2%, and they would like to see a broader discussion. Linking into what the previous table, there was a question presented as to what are scientific facts, and a number of references were made to scientific facts, and were they provable? And then in terms of arguments that hadn't been heard was in relation to is Ireland a Catholic country or a secular state, and they'd like to hear more of that. Does that reflect?
Very good. I hear what you say about the repetition. In relation to the submissions that came by post, it's very obvious. They're very obvious. It's not so obvious in relation to the submissions we got online, but that is something we're looking into. I mean, and I suspect we will be in a position to give a clear idea as to the percentage of repetition we have in the overall range of submissions. So I'll go on now to table 12.
Good morning. Facilitator for table 12. Of the 5 members at table 12, 3 have an absolute objection to the use of the word murder. However, 2 members agree with its use, but are not quite sure at what stage of a termination it would be deemed to be murder. And that was the main point from table 12.
Well, then we'll go on to table 11.
And the citizens on table 11. A number were very surprised as they read through some of the submissions at what was actually involved in medical termination procedures. That is to say that they didn't have an understanding of it before, and they found some of the information obviously quite graphic and difficult. A number of citizens were also very surprised at the number of individuals who took the time to make submissions accounting for their own personal experiences, often some very, very difficult ones. One member was quite taken back by the large number of submissions from religious organisations. And finally, the the sheer volume of submissions has kind of brought home to everybody the amount of public engagement across the nation, and it demonstrates the importance of this Citizens' Assembly, its process, and the responsibility that it brings to bear on the people involved.
Thank you very much. We're now going to table 10.
Thank you. I'm the facilitator for table 10. This table also felt that it might have been easier to process the 237 pages of documentation if the repetition had been avoided, and perhaps those who had made these submissions, it would have been a preferable option to have had some form of petition with a list of names representing that submission. This table found that it was notable that there were so many college votes taken, and that of the younger generation, the general view seemed to be more liberal. This table also found that the personal stories were very brave and very helpful. Just 1 or 2 of note. One young girl, she couldn't afford to travel and she took the abortion pill, and she felt that she was dying but that she couldn't go to her GP because she would be asking her GP to break the law and assisting her, and in the end her flatmates had to help her. Another man had been born in a mother and baby's home, and he felt that had abortion been possible, he would never have been born. And yet one member of this table made the point that, well, if contraception hadn't been available or had been available at the time she was born, she may never have been born. So this perhaps wasn't a sufficient argument. to repeat the comment of Table 13, the submission of one lady that how could a group of cells have the same status as a woman was observed or noted in the overall submissions. Another comment on the overall submissions was that there were a number of lovely submissions from people whose family or who had family members with Down syndrome, and this was found to be a good thing, but perhaps not the central issue of what was required to be discussed. In that I felt that if abortion was available on a more liberal basis, that the societal viewpoint in Ireland would still be that children with Down syndrome would still be born regardless. Another comment made at this table was that it was surprising the demographic of issue, in that there were a higher proportion of married women with children who had abortions rather than single mothers on their first pregnancy, and it had been thought that the demographic that we were dealing with was a much younger demographic, but that it was surprising that this is in fact not the case. Just two more comments on the overall submissions. One submission was noted from a 39-year-old lady who felt that she had never been allowed to choose. The Eighth Amendment was adopted in 1983, so anybody under the age of 51 simply hasn't had a chance to choose on this issue, and she felt that societal attitudes in Ireland had changed. And finally, there was a point that it was felt some pro-life comments thought that what was going to happen through this process was that we were going to change the constitution, whereas if anything, the citizens would decide to change the constitution, but if anything, what would happen would be that the citizens might suggest a referendum, and in that case, everybody would have the freedom to decide at that point. So this process isn't to make a decision on behalf of everybody, it's to decide how to let others make a decision.
Yes, well, that is the case. We're just making recommendations at the request of both houses of the Oireachtas. It would be for the Oireachtas and then perhaps for the people in a referendum to make the final decision. But in any event, I just would like to say in relation to the repetition, this was a random selection, and we have outlined the methodology involved in choosing the submissions we chose, the 300 we chose, and that will be online if anybody wants to look at it. We'll now move on to Table 9.
Thank you. It was the view of the citizens at Table 9 that, again, there was a lot of repetition, but and also agree with Table 14 that the emotiveness made it very difficult. One member felt getting through the submissions that they would bypass the ones that were very emotive and emotional because it was hard to get through anything factual, that it was mostly just emotion. They also felt that the stories had much more impact, that had anecdotal parts of them, rather than just the core information, although it was not enough to sway anyone else's opinion. One member thought that the website should have a mission statement as to whether the Assembly is what the Assembly
Sorry, would you repeat that, please?
is doing and informing the public of the purpose, because several members had expressed that there was some confusion what their role was in this Assembly.
Sorry, Danielle, can I just clarify? Do you mean,
I'm sorry?
Can I just clarify, with the confusion that you're articulating, is the confusion coming through in the submissions as opposed to confusion at the table about the role of the Assembly?
There was confusion in general of friends and neighbours and people like that had asked them what they were doing and thought that they were actually deciding whether or not law was going to be changed or whatever, that they were supposed to arrive at something dispositive rather than just as a forum to understand these issues.
Thanks, Danielle.
Yeah. And there was a feeling that women have more understanding personally of this issue. That was unanimous. And the last thing was that everyone seemed unanimous that getting support for disabilities would be an important part of the decision whether or not to abort, because obviously whether or not they could bring a child into the world and they would have the support of the Irish government would, you know, be a big consideration for them in terms of the moral consideration as well as the practical consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, table 8.
Thank you, Judge. The citizens at table 8 were of the view that the submissions were the same polarised views as always. Some of them presented from a strident religious perspective and unsympathetic, and others presented from a legal basis. It was the view that the submissions on both sides of the argument were absent any well-constructed arguments. In relation to the surprises from the submission, there were 2 referenced. One was the number of overseas submissions, and the citizens at this table were wondering, is there a number? Do we know how many submissions there were from overseas, or what percentage of the total there were?
Well, we don't know at this stage. It's probably possible.
I'm not sure if it will be possible to get a definitive number on that, because in some cases you might be guessing from the the email address, for example. So it may not be it may be difficult to actually get an accurate figure on that.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. And the other surprise was the number of submissions from men, and it was the view that they were largely unsympathetic towards women. It was also a surprise was the predominance of submissions on the pro-life side that were submitted from individuals. In terms of what was new from the submissions, or interesting, was the experience of the women who had to travel, and those experiences were found to be very informative. A final question was, were there any submissions that actually proposed workable solutions to the issue?
Well, I don't think we're in a position to answer that at this stage. I mean, this is not the end of the road in relation to the submissions, and we will be looking at what use we can make of the submissions further. This is just, if you like, an opening session in relation to submissions. But it's useful to have that question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Judge.
Table 7.
Table 7. The point raised by the citizens at our table that there were lots of similar submissions,
Yes.
and our table, the table, we were surprised at how many personal submissions were made, and there was nothing in the pro-life, pro-choice argument that surprised the citizens at this table. Some citizens were surprised at how personal some of the submissions were, and the diversity of circumstances where abortion was involved.
Thank you very much. And now it's table 6. I think we've got the message about the repetition, and time is running out. So we'll take that as proven, so that we can save some time.
So these are the views that were expressed by the members of the table, and again there was mixed views expressed. A member of the table highlighted a submission that they'd found online that wasn't included within the book, and it was titled Life Against Abortion, and they felt that this should be read by everyone, that was of vital importance. Another member highlighted a submission they had found online from the EAI, and they also felt this was of importance. In terms of the random sample, a member discussed the submission from the Green Party. They felt this was well balanced, and they said importantly it looked at how the world might look post-repeal, and they felt this was of importance. A member of the table also expressed interest on the first social laws brought in by Hitler in relation to abortion, and they found this of surprise or of interest when going through the submissions. It was also highlighted by a member of the table that there was a sense that there was more pro-life submissions within the random sample than pro-choice. And it was also expressed by a member of the table that they were surprised by the very large number of submissions that were made. And that's the main points from the
Very good.
table.
Thank you very much. And again, I emphasise this is a random sample. It doesn't mean we're ignoring the other submissions. Table 5 now.
Thank you, Judge. These are some of the views from the table here. I might just start off by saying that they kind of felt that they needed table 8. There was so much variation in discussion, they thought they might have their own table. But apart from that, they expressed no surprise that there was no solutions put forward in the document, although some of the views here took into account that the document that we were looking at didn't really come up with any solutions. There weren't really any arguments, but they felt that the idea of the views that were expressed by the public at large were very valuable in regard to giving each citizen an opportunity to express their views on the very sensitive topic that we're talking about. Some members suggested that the law can't stay the way it is. And I think overall the views were pretty divisive along the different types of argument. That's all we've got to say at the moment.
Very good. Thank you very much. Table 4, please. Oh, it's over on this side.
Thank you, Justice Laffoy. The discussion at this table was along very similar lines to what we've already heard. So what I just might say is it was the unanimous opinion of the citizens at this table that there was nothing in the submissions that surprised the citizens. It was also the unanimous opinion of the citizens that there were no arguments presented by either side that the citizens had not encountered before. However, one citizen felt that it was important to note the submission from a mental health advocacy group, which highlighted the need for new or strengthened laws in the Capacity Making Act 2015 for persons with intellectual disabilities, that only in the case or the event of a repeal of the 8th, that these laws needed to be reformed at the same time. And I felt that was a very important point that needed to be made. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. That will be noted. Thank you. Table 3.
Thank you, Judge Laffoy. In relation to the repetition, I know we've discussed it, but the citizens at this table did note that the postal submissions were very, very pro-life. Almost all the postal submissions were pro-life, and they wondered, was this a reflection on the demographic of people submitting by post over the internet? The citizens felt that the submissions of first-hand personal experience were a lot more helpful to them in forming their views. They felt that the medical community in some incidents are afraid to make decisions because they don't know where they stand legally. They were very surprised by people comparing abortion to the Holocaust, and they felt that there was a lot of misinformation in the submissions, and that there needs to be better education, or sexual education and reproduction education for both men and women. They would like to hear more from somebody who has who have children with disabilities and what supports are in place for them. And another thing that came up was they would like to hear from other countries where it's illegal to have abortion and what the reasoning is behind that. And that's the submissions from the citizens at Table 3.
Well, we'll take on board those suggestions. Thank you. Table 2.
So, without wanting to repeat a lot of what's been said already today, so our Table 2, felt that the random sample we have here didn't really seem representative of the balance of views that we've experienced thus far in the Assembly. It appears to be heavily weighted towards the pro-life view. We didn't feel we got much from the pre-printed repetitive submissions. There was a sense that there was more value placed on a line or two of a personal email than the repetition of the pre-printed submissions. And then just a note would be, we would like to see and I don't think this is available yet, but when it is available, we would like to see just on a data sheet, the entire submissions, which percent, which of the entire submissions, where on the side of the argument, percentage-wise, did the submissions lie? Like of the 13,500, how many were pro-life and how many were pro-choice? And do we have that data? Thanks.
Well, we'll consider that, but it's very doubtful whether that could be done.
Okay.
But we'll definitely consider it.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Table 1 then.
Thank you. This table was unanimous in expressing the view that in general the pro-life submissions offered no solutions and they didn't analyse or address the true complexities of the situation. This table was also unanimous in expressing surprise that the phenomenon of the ordering of abortifacient drugs online did not feature more prominently in the submissions. However, several members of this table had read one personal submission of a young lady who had done so and had experienced complications and the difficulty she felt in accessing medical services because of the legal situation.
And I think that has already been alluded to.
And this table, bar one member at this table who said there was no new perspectives in the submissions. Everybody else agreed that to some degree there was, and ones that were mentioned specifically were the issue of the difficulty for disabled people travelling to access terminations, the position of migrants in direct provision, the perspective of men, of prospective fathers. I think there were some personal submissions that people were curious about. And lastly, the issue of the Eighth Amendment impacting on women's ability to consent or refuse to consent to a broad range of treatments surrounding maternity rather than just terminations. This table was unanimous in expressing discomfort at those groups which chose to address submissions to individual members of the Assembly. And I won't labour the point that has been made about repetition. However, this table was anxious and was unanimous in it to be expressed that they appreciated the great deal of work that the Secretariat has put into in collating those.
Yes,
so thank you.
Good. Very good. Thank you very much. Well, I think we've got a lot of information from this exercise. Obviously, we will collate the information and we will use it and we will take on board everything that has been said. But at this stage, this is, as I say, the opening sally, if I may put it that way. We have a lot more work to do in relation to the submissions, and we will be asking you to consider them further. But I do want to emphasise once again, and I'm probably getting a little bit boring at this stage on this, it was a random selection, and a methodology was chosen to produce the range, and that has to be borne in mind. So, as I say, thank you very much for the assistance you've given us on that. It's definitely useful, and I think you're entitled to a little break now for a cup of coffee, and we'll start again at 11:30. Thank you very much.